Have you ever noticed her? The woman who walks into a room and the very air seems to shift, to hold its breath for a moment. She isn't necessarily the loudest, nor the most conventionally beautiful, but there is an undeniable gravity to her presence. Men, particularly those who are accustomed to being in charge, to leading, to being the center of their own universe, find their gaze drawn to her, not with the familiar spark of fleeting desire, but with a deeper, more unsettling sense of curiosity and respect. They listen when she speaks, and more profoundly, they are aware of her silence. You may have asked yourself what her secret is. In a world saturated with advice on how to be more attractive, how to capture and keep attention, how to play the game of modern romance, she seems to operate under a completely different set of rules. The truth is, she does. But they are not rules of engagement. They are rules of being. The answer to her power is not found in what she does, but in what she refuses to do. It is not located in the questions she asks, but in the 4 fundamental questions she has learned, through a profound inner alchemy, that she must never, ever voice. Many believe that power in the dynamic between men and women is about control, about leverage, about who needs the other less. But this is a juvenile and exhausting game, a relic of an unconscious era. The reality is far more subtle, far more potent. The ultimate power lies in a state of being so whole, so self-possessed, that the frantic need for answers, for validation, for certainty simply dissolves. This is not about a tactic. This is about a transformation. And it begins by understanding the silent poison embedded in 4 seemingly innocent questions. This phenomenon, this quiet magnetism, is not a happy accident of personality. It is the end result of a grueling inner journey, one that the great psychologist Carl Jung would have called the process of individuation. Jung taught that to become whole, one must confront the shadow, the repressed, unacknowledged, and often wounded parts of the psyche. This woman you see, the one who commands this quiet authority, has been to the underworld of her own soul and returned. She has met her own shadow, the part of her that once felt needy, incomplete, and desperate for external validation. She has looked into the eyes of her own inner emptiness and, instead of running from it, she has learned to fill it from within. What you are witnessing is not a woman who has found a clever dating strategy. You are witnessing a woman who has achieved a level of psychological sovereignty. She understands the archetypal dance at play in all human interaction. She recognizes the animus, the masculine archetype within her own soul, and has learned to integrate its strength, its logic, and its capacity for action, so she no longer needs to project it onto an external man, demanding that he be her rock, her provider, her everything. Consequently, she has transcended the role of the damsel, the maiden, the eternal feminine waiting to be rescued or completed. She is the queen archetype, not because she rules over others, but because she has absolute dominion over the kingdom of herself. Her power is not threatening because it seeks to conquer, but because it has no need to. It simply is. And in a world built on the fragile economies of need and validation, a person who needs nothing from you is the most powerful person in the room. This is the uncomfortable and illuminating truth. Her silence on these 4 questions is not a void. It is a presence. It is the calm, unwavering hum of a person who is anchored in their own being. Before she became this woman, she was someone else entirely. She was, perhaps, a version of a woman we all know or have been. She loved to the point of erasure. She gave until her own well was dust. She was a master architect of fantasies, building entire futures in her mind based on a few promising words or a fleeting moment of connection. She used to ask the questions. Oh, she asked them with the desperate urgency of a drowning person gasping for air. Her entire sense of self-worth was a fragile vessel, handed over to others to be filled or shattered at their whim. She confused attachment with love, anxiety with passion, and control with security. She believed that love was something you had to earn, to fight for, to prove yourself worthy of. Her relationships were a repeating script of the same tragedy. She would meet someone who embodied a potential she craved, a strength she felt she lacked, and she would pour herself into the project of his becoming, hoping that in fixing him, she could finally feel whole herself. She was drawn to the emotionally unavailable, the narcissistic, the man-child who promised a kingdom but could barely manage his own small village. Why? Because they were perfect mirrors for her own inner state. They reflected back to her the fundamental belief that she was not enough on her own. Her life was a series of frantic check-ins. She monitored response times, analyzed the subtext of every message, and sought constant reassurance. She would ask, in 100 different ways, "Am I safe with you? Do you see me? Am I valuable to you?" And the men she chose, by the very nature of their own wounds, could never give her the answer she truly needed, because the answer did not exist outside of herself. She was a ghost in her own life, haunting the edges of other people's worlds, hoping to be invited in. The turning point was not a single cinematic moment of revelation. It was a slow erosion. It was the 1,000th paper cut of disappointment, the soul-crushing exhaustion of another failed attempt to be seen, to be chosen. The pain finally became so immense, so repetitive, that it stopped being just pain. It began to teach. It was a brutal but merciful teacher. One day, after a particularly gut-wrenching ending that followed the same predictable pattern as all the others, she did not look for a new distraction. She did not download another app or seek the comfort of friends who would tell her, "He didn't deserve you." She knew, on a level that bypassed logic and went straight to the bone, that the common denominator in all her failed equations was her. Not her fault, but her pattern, her choice, her emptiness. And so, she finally did the one thing she had been avoiding her entire life. She turned her gaze inward. She stopped. She sat in the deafening silence of her own company, and she allowed herself to feel the full, terrifying scope of her loneliness. It was a descent, a journey into the hell of her own story, where the ghosts of her past selves waited for her. The little girl who learned that love was conditional. The teenager who learned that her body was currency. The young woman who learned that her needs were an inconvenience. She met them all not with judgment, but with a fierce, heartbreaking compassion. She began the slow, arduous work of reparenting herself. She learned to nourish herself with silence, to find solace in solitude. She discovered that the validation she had been begging for from others was a fountain that could spring from within. This was her discovery of Jung, not as an academic theory, but as a map home. She began to consciously work with her shadow, admitting to her own neediness, her own manipulative tendencies born of fear, her own crippling insecurity. By bringing these things into the light of her awareness, she did not destroy them. She integrated them. She transmuted them. The neediness became self-reliance. The manipulation became conscious communication. The insecurity became a deep, unshakable self-knowledge. She made a pact with herself, a sacred vow whispered into the darkness of her own soul. She would never again betray herself for the sake of being chosen. She would never again accept crumbs and call it a feast. She was rebuilding herself, piece by piece, from the ground up, not with the pieces of others, but with the solid gold of her own discovered worth. And now we arrive at the core of her transformation, the practical manifestation of this profound inner shift. It is embodied in the 4 questions she will no longer ask. To the uninitiated, her refusal might seem cold, or arrogant, or strange. But to a man of substance, a man who is himself whole and secure, it is the most compelling signal she could possibly send. It is a language of equals. The first question she has permanently retired from her vocabulary is the most common, the most tempting, the most drenched in anxiety. What are we? Or its close cousin, where is this going? She used to ask this. She used to feel a knot of panic tighten in her chest if a connection remained undefined for too long. The ambiguity felt like a threat, a sign that she was not valued enough to be claimed. The question was a desperate grasp for certainty in a universe that offers none. It was an attempt to fast forward to the end of the book to make sure it had a happy ending, because she couldn't bear the suspense of living the story. But now she understands the deep fallacy of this question. It is an act of outsourcing her own perception. It hands all the power of definition to the other person. It says, "Please, tell me what my reality is. Tell me what I am to you, so I know what I am." The transformed woman does not need to ask, "What are we?" Because she is a masterful observer of reality. She watches. She listens. She feels. She knows what it is by what it is, not by what someone labels it. She assesses consistency, reciprocity, respect, and emotional intimacy. Her clarity comes from her own senses, not from a title he bestows upon her. By refusing to ask, she communicates something profound. She communicates trust, not a blind trust in him, but a radical trust in herself to navigate the situation, to see it for what it is, and to walk away if it does not align with her standards. She is not afraid of the present moment. She lives in it. Her lack of anxiety about the future tells a man that she is not looking for a destination. She is enjoying the journey. This lack of pressure is magnetic. It creates space for something authentic to grow, free from the suffocating grip of expectation. She is not an investor demanding a return. She is a fellow traveler, assessing the path as she walks it. The second question that has been banished from her lexicon is any variation of, "Do you think I'm pretty/smart/funny/good enough?" This question is a direct plea for a hit of validation. It is the purest expression of an externalized sense of self. It says, "My opinion of myself is not solid. It is subject to your approval. Please, shore up my fragile ego for a moment." She used to live on these fleeting compliments. A man telling her she was beautiful could sustain her for a day. A man telling her she was intelligent could make her feel worthy for a week. She was a beggar, seeking morsels of affirmation from the outside world. The awakening taught her the most crucial lesson of all. Her worth is non-negotiable, and its appraisal is an inside job. It is not determined by market value. It is not subject to public opinion. Her beauty is in her own gaze when she looks in the mirror. Her intelligence is in the quality of her own thoughts. Her value is inherent, coded into her very existence. So, when she is with a man, the thought of asking for his assessment of her qualities is simply absurd. It would be like the sun asking a planet if it is bright enough. She operates from the assumption of her own worth. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is the loud, insecure performance of someone who is desperate to convince themselves and others of their value. What she possesses is a quiet confidence, a solid state of self-acceptance. By not asking for his approval, she silently communicates that she has already approved of herself. This sends a powerful message to a man of caliber. It tells him that she is not a project to be fixed or a child to be reassured. It signals that any compliment he gives will be received not as life-sustaining validation, but as a beautiful, optional bonus, a genuine appreciation of something she already knows to be true. It invites him to meet her on a plane of mutual admiration between two complete beings, not a hierarchical dynamic of judge and contestant. The third question she has eliminated is the one born of insecurity and a sense of powerlessness. Why didn't you call? Or, why didn't you text back? This question, while seemingly a simple request for information, is loaded with accusation and subtext. It immediately places her in a position of lack, of waiting, of being the one who cares more. It is a demand for an explanation, an attempt to hold the other person accountable for her emotional state. The old version of her would have agonized over a delayed response. Her mind would have spun 1,000 stories of rejection, of other women, of a sudden loss of interest. The silence on the other end of the line was a direct indictment of her worthiness. When she finally broke and asked the question, it was never from a place of genuine curiosity, but from a place of hurt and fear. She was seeking a lie that would soothe her, or a truth that would confirm her worst fears. The woman she is now understands a fundamental principle of energy and self-respect. Her peace is her most valuable asset, and it is not to be disturbed by the inconsistency of others. She no longer chases for explanations. Instead, she observes patterns. A man's communication, its frequency, its quality, its consistency, is simply data. It is information that tells her everything she needs to know about his level of interest, respect, and availability. She does not need to interrogate the data. She simply reads it. If a man is inconsistent, he is telling her, through his actions, that she is not a priority. A verbal excuse or a fabricated reason is irrelevant. His actions are the only truth that matters. By refusing to ask, "Why didn't you call?" she reclaims her power. She is not a prosecutor cross-examining a suspect. She is a sovereign queen observing the behavior of a visitor in her court. Her silence on this matter is deafening. It communicates that her world does not stop when he goes quiet. It communicates that she has a rich, full life that is not dependent on his attention. It tells him that her time and energy are valuable, and she will not waste them trying to decode or correct someone's lack of interest. This forces a man to confront his own behavior. He either steps up and meets her standard of respectful communication, or he quietly fades away, filtered out by her impenetrable sense of self-worth. The fourth and final question she has abandoned is perhaps the most toxic of all, the siren song of codependency. Can you change for me? Or its more manipulative form, if you really loved me, you would. This question is the hallmark of someone who falls in love not with a person, but with their potential. It is an act of profound disrespect, both for the other person and for oneself. It presupposes that she knows what is best for him, that he is a broken thing she can and should fix. It reveals that she is not in a relationship with the man who stands before her, but with a fantasy version of who he could be if only he followed her instructions. She used to be a renovator of men. She saw their flaws as projects, their wounds as opportunities for her to prove her value as a healer. She believed that her love was so powerful it could inspire transformation. It was a noble but deeply misguided and arrogant endeavor. It always ended in resentment, his, for being constantly criticized and found wanting, and hers, for her efforts not being appreciated or reciprocated. The awakened woman understands a stark and liberating truth. You cannot change anyone. People only change when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing, and that is a calculation only they can make. Her job is not to be a catalyst for his change, but to be a ruthless curator of her own reality. She accepts people exactly as they show themselves to be. Her discernment is razor-sharp. She assesses a man based on his demonstrated character, his values in action, his present-day reality, not his soaring promises or his tragic backstory. If that reality is not compatible with what she wants and deserves, she does not launch a campaign to reform him. She simply walks away. Her refusal to ask him to change is the ultimate act of respect. It respects his sovereignty to be who he is, and it respects her own right to choose what she allows into her life. This communicates to a man of substance that she is not seeking to control him or mold him. She is seeking a partner, not a project. It tells him she is able to see him clearly, for who he truly is, and that if she chooses to be with him, it is because she accepts and desires that truth. This is the foundation of genuine intimacy, not the merging of two halves trying to fix each other, but the respectful alliance of two whole, sovereign beings. The world does not know what to do with this woman. She is an anomaly, a disruption to the ancient, unspoken contracts of gender dynamics. Her presence elicits two primary reactions: deep admiration or intense fear. There is no middle ground. To the unconscious man, the man who has built his identity on the fragile scaffolding of control and the validation of female neediness, she is terrifying. He tries his usual tactics, the subtle negging, the displays of status, the tests of compliance, and they find no purchase. It is like throwing stones into a vast, calm ocean. They simply disappear without a ripple. Her self-possession feels like a judgment of his own lack. He cannot manipulate her with guilt, because she does not seek his approval. He cannot control her with jealousy, because her sense of security is internal. He might label her as cold, arrogant, difficult, or a host of other terms used to pathologize female strength. In reality, he is simply frustrated because his keys do not fit her locks. She shatters the logic of his world, and for that, he fears and resents her. But to the conscious man, the man who has done his own inner work, who is secure in his own being and is not looking for a woman to complete him, she is a revelation. He recognizes her sovereignty because he has cultivated his own. Her wholeness does not threaten him. It excites him. He sees her not as a conquest, but as a counterpart. Her refusal to ask the 4 questions is not a sign of disinterest, but a signal of profound health. It is a relief. He doesn't have to spend his energy constantly reassuring her or managing her insecurities. He is free to engage with her on a level of intellectual, emotional, and spiritual mutuality. He sees a partner who can stand on her own 2 feet, who can challenge him, grow with him, and meet him in a space of radical honesty and deep respect. She becomes a mirror for his own strength, and in her presence, he feels more himself, not less. She moves through a world that still, in many ways, preaches that a woman's ultimate fulfillment is to be chosen. A world that whispers that her biological clock is ticking, that she is being too picky, that she will end up alone if she doesn't lower her standards. She hears these voices, but they sound like transmissions from a distant, irrelevant star. The fear of being alone was the ghost that haunted her old life, the fear that drove her to accept relationships that were a slow-acting poison. But through her journey inward, she made a startling discovery. The thing she had feared most, solitude, was actually the source of her greatest power. She learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. Being alone is a physical state. Being lonely is a spiritual ailment. She has healed that ailment. She now savors her solitude. It is the sacred space where she recharges, where she connects with herself, where she hears her own wisdom without the static of external opinions. She would rather be joyfully, peacefully alone than be poorly partnered. This is not a defense mechanism. It is a declaration of her highest standard. It is a revolution of one. She is not against love or partnership. On the contrary, she values it so highly that she will not accept a counterfeit version. She is waiting for a love that doesn't diminish her, but expands her. A love that is not a merger of 2 needy halves, but a dance of 2 whole, sovereign souls. She has transcended the paradigm of happily ever after and entered the realm of happily right now, within herself. So, when you see this woman, understand that you are not just seeing a person but a possibility. You are seeing the living embodiment of a psychological and spiritual evolution. Her journey from the desperate asking of questions to the powerful silence of self-possession is the archetypal story of awakening. It is the path from seeking love to becoming love. The love that will eventually find her, should she choose it, will be of a different quality and texture than any she has known before. It will not be salvation. It will be a celebration. It will not be a rescue. It will be a meeting. It will be the calm, profound, and exhilarating recognition of finding another who speaks the same silent language of wholeness. Her ultimate achievement is not commanding the respect of powerful men. That is merely a byproduct. Her ultimate achievement is commanding the unwavering, unconditional respect of herself. She has learned the most vital lesson. The relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship you will ever have. She has finally come home to herself, and in doing so, she has become a beacon for others who are ready to begin their own journey home. Maybe this message did not find you by accident. Perhaps there is a part of you that recognizes the truth in this story, a quiet whisper in your own soul that is tired of asking the old questions and is ready to embrace a new way of being. If something inside you was stirred by this, if a spark of recognition was lit, do not ignore it. That is the beginning of your own awakening. It is the call to your own sovereignty. Let this message be more than just a passing video. Let it be a seed. And if you feel it resonates, share this message. Not out of impulse, but out of choice. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Like it, not just to support a channel, but to cast a vote for this kind of consciousness. And leave a comment below, sharing which of the 4 questions you are ready to let go of. Subscribe to become part of a community that is choosing to redefine strength, love, and the power that lies not in what we ask of the world, but in what we unapologetically are.